The elevator smelled like expensive coffee and someone's anxiety. The anxiety was Jeong Da-Eun's. The coffee was the building's. She had arrived 7 minutes early for her interview, which she considered adequate. She had her portfolio. She had printed copies of her resume on paper that was slightly heavier than standard, which her previous colleague had told her was pretentious and which she had done anyway, because attention to material was part of her point. She had rehearsed answers to 12 probable questions and had opinions about all of them. She had not rehearsed what to do in an elevator with a man reading a report she recognized. He was tall, dark suit, the kind of stillness that didn't come from relaxation, but from discipline. A person who had decided at some point that unnecessary movement was a resource expenditure and had stopped making it. He was reading without looking up when she got in. She pressed 30. He was already on 30. She stood on her side of the elevator and looked at the floor numbers and did not look at the report. She lasted 11 seconds. The report had a blue cover with the logo of her previous company in the upper right corner. She had worked on 7 projects with that logo. She had worked specifically on the financial analysis that lived on pages 5 through 9 of any standard deliverable they produced. She had spent 4 days on page 7 specifically, which was the projection model, which had a structural issue that her supervisor had told her was fine and that she had known was not fine, and that had kept her up for 2 nights. She looked at page 7. He was on page 7. The discount rate assumption is wrong, she said. Not loudly. Not to him exactly. More in the way that people say true things they can't keep inside when the evidence is directly in front of them. A reflex. An occupational hazard. The man turned page 7 toward himself slightly and looked at it. He turned to page 8. He turned back to page 7. He said nothing. The elevator reached 30. The doors opened. The 32nd floor of Ryu Group was the kind of floor that communicated through carpet density and the quality of the light fixtures and the specific temperature of the air. That decisions made here had consequences. 12 people in the open office area looked up when the elevator opened. 12 people saw Ryu Jae-Hyun step out of the elevator. 12 people's faces did the thing faces do when the CEO appears unexpectedly. Then they saw the woman behind him, and the faces did something else. Something between confusion and the particular concern of people watching someone walk toward a cliff without seeing it. Jae-Hyun said something to the man waiting near the elevator. Short, quiet, the kind of instruction that didn't need volume because it was always going to be followed. Nam Cheol-soo looked at Da-Eun. Da-Eun looked at the 12 people looking at her. Da-Eun looked at the man who had stepped out of the elevator with the report in his hand and the blue logo in the upper corner, and the discount rate assumption she had just told him was wrong. Something assembled itself in her mind. It assembled slowly, and then all at once, the way realizations do when you have been given all the pieces and simply needed a moment. She started. Come with me, Cheol-soo said. She came. Behind her, she heard Cheol-soo take out his phone, heard the specific sound of a message being typed with the speed of someone who had important news and a very receptive audience. She did not know at this point that the audience was his mother. She did not know a lot of things yet. The office at the end of the hall was not where interviews happened. Da-Eun knew this because she had prepared for this interview with the thoroughness of someone who had been fired twice for saying true things to people who didn't want to hear them and was not interested in a third occurrence. She had researched Ryu Group's hiring process. 6 rounds she had read on 3 separate professional forums, all written with the reverence of people describing a religious ritual. Competency assessment, technical review, panel interview, cultural fit evaluation, senior leadership interview, final approval. She was in the final approval office without having done any of the others. Ryu Jae-Hyun sat behind a desk that was, notably, not covered in the decorative objects that executives use to signal their personalities. It had a laptop, a phone, a glass of water, and the report. The report was on the desk now, open to page 7, which she noticed and which she chose not to comment on. Tell me about the discount rate, he said. Not, tell me about yourself. Not, why do you want to work here? Tell me about the discount rate, she told him. She had thought about this for 4 days and 2 sleepless nights, so she had a great deal to tell him, and she told him the relevant parts in the order that made them most coherent, which took approximately 4 minutes. He listened without writing anything down. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. What would you have used instead? She told him that too. He looked at the report, looked at her. You're hired, he said. She waited for the rest of the sentence. There was no rest of the sentence. The interview, she said. This was the interview. There are supposed to be 6 rounds. There are, he said. You did them in 4 minutes. He looked at his laptop. The conversation, from his posture, appeared to be over. Da-Eun sat in the chair across from the CEO of Ryu Group and tried to locate her professional composure, which had gone somewhere during the elevator and had not entirely returned. I don't have my contract, she said. HR will send it. I don't know my salary. HR will tell you. I haven't agreed to anything. He looked up. They looked at each other for a moment, the specific look of 2 people who are assessing each other with the same quality of attention and are both aware that this is what's happening. Do you want the job? He said. She thought about her 3rd firing, about the report, about page 7, about the specific feeling of being right about something and having no one with the authority to care. Yes, she said. Then you're hired. The door opened. Han Myung-ja stood in the frame with the ease of someone who had been walking through that door for 20 years and had never needed to knock. She looked at Jae-Hyun. She looked at Da-Eun. Something crossed her face, not surprise, which was remarkable given the circumstances. Something more like the expression of a person checking a box they have been waiting to check for a long time. Interesting, she said. To no one specifically. To the room. She left. Da-Eun looked at the empty doorframe, looked at Jae-Hyun. He had returned to his laptop. She stood, picked up her portfolio, the one with the heavier paper, the one she had not opened once during the interview that had lasted 6 minutes and covered none of the 12 questions she had prepared for. Cheol-soo appeared in the doorway with a visitor's badge and the expression of a person who had witnessed something that had fundamentally revised his understanding of how the world worked. I'll show you to HR, he said. She followed him into the hallway. Behind her, she heard his phone buzz, heard him glance at it, heard a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and disbelief. My mother says, congratulations, he said. Da-Eun decided not to ask. The position was called Senior Strategy Associate. Da-Eun read the contract twice, which was once more than she usually read contracts and once less than she should have, and signed it at 11:43 a.m. on the same day she had arrived for an interview she had not completed by any standard definition of the word. By 2 p.m., she had a desk. By 2:15, she had met Oh Sung-wook. He appeared at the edge of her desk with the specific energy of someone who had arranged to seem like they were passing by. Late 40s, silver at the temples, the kind of professional polish that came from years of being the most senior person in every room he chose to enter. He smiled at her with the warmth of someone who had practiced warmth until it became a deployable skill. Da-Eun-si, he said. Welcome. I'm Oh Sung-wook, Director of Operations. I work closely with the strategy team. A pause. Your team, I should say. Thank you, she said. Quite an entrance, he said. The CEO himself. That almost never happens. He said almost with a precision that was doing work. I heard about the elevator. She looked at him. Word travels fast here, he said. It's a close team. He gestured at the open office, the 12 people, all of whom had found reasons to be looking at their screens. I just wanted to introduce myself, make sure you felt supported. I appreciate that, she said. He smiled again. Left. Da-Eun looked at the desk, looked at the computer that had been set up for her with the password on a sticky note, looked at the folder of project materials that someone had left, the current client engagement, active, in progress, hers to step into. She opened the folder. She read the project brief. She turned to the financial model. She found the client name. It was the same client as the report, the same report, the same blue logo in the upper corner. The project was ongoing. The deliverable she had worked on at her previous company had fed into a broader engagement. And that engagement had been picked up by Ryu Group. and the financial model she was now looking at was built on the foundation of the numbers she had spent 4 days on, including the projection on page 7 that had the discount rate assumption that was wrong. The model had inherited the error. She sat with this for a moment. Then she looked across the office to where Oh Sung-wook had returned to his own desk and was typing something with the relaxed efficiency of a man who felt good about how a conversation had gone. She looked back at her screen. She started working. At 4 p.m., there was a team meeting. 6 people, a glass-walled room, a presentation on the client engagement's current status. Da-Eun sat at the end of the table and listened and took notes in her own shorthand, and did not say anything for 38 minutes. At minute 39, the team lead asked if she had any initial observations. She had initial observations. She shared them in the order that made them most coherent, which took approximately 6 minutes, and covered the structural issue in the financial model and its origin, and what would need to change before the next client presentation, and why this mattered more urgently than the timeline currently reflected. The room was quiet, in the specific way rooms are quiet when someone has said something true that is also inconvenient. Through the glass wall, in the hallway, Ryu Jae-Hyun had stopped walking. He was looking at the meeting room. Da-Eun did not see this, because she was looking at the whiteboard where she had drawn a quick diagram to illustrate the compounding effect of the error over the projection period. Sung-wook, in the second chair, was looking at his own hands with an expression that had rearranged itself from the warmth of the morning into something more controlled and more careful. The meeting ended. Da-Eun walked out of the glass room and nearly collided with Jae-Hyun, who was still in the hallway. "The projection," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her for a moment with the same quality of attention as the elevator. He continued down the hallway. She went back to her desk. She started fixing the model. The system access request went in at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. Da-Eun had filed it the correct way. The form, the justification, the supervisor approval field which she had left blank because she did not yet have a direct supervisor formally assigned, and had written pending in the box with the optimism of someone who believed administrative systems responded to good faith. By 4 p.m., the request had not been processed. She followed up. By 6 p.m., she had received an automated response informing her that her request was in queue and would be addressed within 3 to 5 business days, which was not useful because she needed the historical data to correct the financial model before Friday's internal review. She went to the IT floor. The IT floor told her that access requests for senior associates required director-level approval, and that the director who covered her department was Oh Sung-wook, and that he had not responded to their escalation. She went back to her desk. She sat with this for a moment. She picked up her laptop and the charger and the coffee she had been reheating twice an hour since 2 p.m., and walked down the hall, looking for the server archive that she had been told was on the 31st floor in a room marked Data Resources. The room marked Data Resources on the 31st floor was locked. The room next to it was not. She went in. It was an office, large, quiet. The kind of quiet that existed because of good insulation and intentional design. A desk with a laptop, a phone, a glass of water, and no decorative objects. A view of the city that suggested a floor higher than 31. She was on 32. She stood in the doorway with her laptop and her charger and her twice reheated coffee and understood, with the specific clarity of someone who has made the same category of mistake before and recognizes it immediately this time, that she was in the wrong room. Ryu Jae-Hyun was at the desk. He looked at her. She looked at him. She looked at the door she had come through, which had been unlocked and which she now noticed had a small engraved nameplate that she had walked past without reading. "I was looking for Data Resources," she said. "Next door," he said. "It's locked." "Yes." He looked at her laptop. "What do you need?" She told him. The access request, the queue, the 3 to 5 business days, the Friday deadline, Sung-wook's name in the director approval field that had not been filled. He looked at his own laptop. He typed something. 3 lines. Pressed enter. He looked at her laptop. "Try now," he said. She opened the system, entered her credentials. The historical data folder opened. She looked at the screen. She looked at him. He had already returned to whatever he had been doing before she walked into his office by mistake. "Thank you," she said. He said nothing. She turned to leave. "The model correction," he said without looking up. "You have until Thursday." She turned back. "The review is Friday." "I moved it. You have Thursday." A pause. "That's one more day." She looked at the back of his head, which was currently angled at his laptop with the same focused stillness as the elevator and the interview in the hallway outside the meeting room. A man who paid attention with his whole attention to specific things at specific moments and did not make a production of it. "Thursday," she said. She left. In the hallway, Cheol-soo materialized beside her with the timing of someone who had been nearby for reasons he was not going to explain. "You went into his office," he said, "by mistake. The nameplate is engraved." "I wasn't reading nameplates." Cheol-soo looked at her, looked at the door she had come out of, looked back at her. "The door was unlocked," he said, in the tone of someone processing a theological inconsistency. "Yes. That door is never unlocked." She walked toward the elevator. Behind her, she heard the specific sound of a message being typed with great speed. Later, at her desk, with the historical data open and the model correction in progress, Myung-ja stopped beside her without slowing her pace. Did not look at her. Said, to the middle distance, "You are like she was." Gone before Da-Eun could ask who. Sung-wook worked late on Wednesday. This was not unusual. He had a reputation for dedication that he had cultivated carefully over 11 years, arriving early and leaving late in the visible way, in the way that got noticed and noted and factored into the calculations of people who made decisions about promotions. The dedication was real. Its object was sometimes the company and sometimes Sung-wook, and he had long since stopped tracking which was which. Wednesday night, the object was Sung-wook. He had the financial model open. Da-Eun's corrected version, she had submitted it to the shared server at 7:43 p.m., 3 hours ahead of Thursday's deadline, with a note that said the revised projection and the original error source were both documented in the appendix. He read the appendix. He sat with it for a while. The promotion he had been expecting, had been planning, had structured the past 8 months around, had had 3 quiet conversations with 2 board members about. Depended on a reorganization that depended on the senior strategy associate position remaining in a state of managed underperformance. A position that stayed below expectations long enough to justify restructuring the team around his directorship. A position that Jeong Da-Eun had walked into off an elevator and immediately begun performing above expectations in. He opened the model. He made changes carefully. Not large changes. Large changes were detectable. Small ones. Specific ones. The kind that changed a conclusion without obviously touching the numbers that led to it. He had been in financial analysis for long enough to know exactly where the load-bearing walls were and exactly how to move them without anyone watching seeing the structure shift. He saved the file under Da-Eun's credentials, which he had access to because he had processed her system setup and had kept a note of the temporary password before it was changed, which she had changed to something he couldn't access, but which had a brief window he had used. He submitted a request for emergency council review at 9 a.m. Thursday. The grounds: potential deliberate manipulation of client financial data by the new senior associate. The evidence: the model, as it now existed on the server. He sent it. Went home. Slept the sleep of someone who had done a calculation and was satisfied with the result. What Sung-wook did not know, Nam Cheol-soo had a system. It was not a company-sanctioned system. It was a personal system that Cheol-soo had developed in his second year at Ryu Group after a version control disaster on a client deliverable had caused 17 people a very bad week, and Cheol-soo, specifically, a very bad month. The system was simple. Every evening at 6 p.m., a script he had written ran a backup of every active file on the strategy team server to a secondary location that was technically within the company's infrastructure, but that nobody except Cheol-soo knew existed. The backup ran at 6 p.m. Da-Eun had submitted her corrected model at 7:43 p.m. Sung-wook had made his changes sometime after 9 p.m. The 6 p.m. backup contained Da-Eun's file as it existed at 6 p.m. Mid-correction, time-stamped, with her credentials and her edits, and the documented error source in the partial appendix she had been building all day. The post-9 p.m. version on the server contained Sung-wook's changes. Cheol-soo did not know this yet. He would. On Thursday morning, Jae-Hyun read the emergency review request over his morning coffee. He read it once. He set it down. He picked it up and read it again with the quality of attention that meant he was not reading for information, but for structure. For what the document was doing rather than what it was saying. He called Seoul. "The strategy server," he said. "Anything unusual in the version history of the engagement model for the current client?" Seoul checked. There was a silence on the phone that lasted approximately 40 seconds, which for Seoul was geologically long. "There are two versions," Seoul said slowly. "One from before 6, one from after 9. The conclusions are different. Who has credentials for the post-9 version?" Another silence. "It's logged under Da-Eun's credentials," Seoul said. "But..." A pause. "I have a backup from 6. It's her work. The real version. You can see every edit she made, time-stamped all day." "Send me both." "Already sending." Jae-Hyun looked at the emergency review request on his desk. He picked up his pen. He wrote one word in the margin. He put the request in his jacket pocket and stood and put on his jacket and went to find Seoul, who was already printing things with the focused energy of someone who understood exactly what the evidence meant and was making sure it was legible. "The review is this afternoon," Seoul said. "I know. She doesn't know what's been done to the file." Jae-Hyun looked at Seoul. "She'll handle it," he said. Seoul looked at him with the expression of someone who had worked for this man for 4 years and had just seen something new. "You're sure?" Seoul said. "Yes," he said. He went back to his office. Seoul stood with the printed documents and thought about elevators and discount rates and doors that were usually locked. He sent his mother a message. She responded in 14 seconds with 7 question marks. The review was called for 3 p.m. Da-Eun found out at 2:47. The email from the council secretary was formal and brief and used the phrase irregularities in submitted financial analysis in the second sentence, which was a phrase that had a specific meaning in the context of professional services, and that meaning was not good. She read it at her desk with the particular stillness of someone receiving information that is bad and is deciding, before anything else, that's all, not to react visibly. She closed the email. She opened the model on her screen. She looked at it for a long time. Something was wrong with it. Not her error. She knew her own work with the intimacy of someone who had spent 2 days inside it, who had traced every calculation back to its source, and documented every change and written the appendix specifically so that anyone reading it could follow the thread of her reasoning from beginning to end. This was not her reasoning. The conclusions were hers. Someone had kept the shape of her work and changed the interior, the way you could keep the facade of a building and gut everything behind it. She looked at the specific changes. She looked at where the load-bearing walls had been moved. She understood what had happened before she understood who had done it. She closed the model. She went to the review. The room was a medium-sized conference room on the 28th floor, not the main boardroom, which was a choice that said, significant but not final, correctable if necessary. 3 council members at the table. Oh Sung-wook at the far end, with a laptop open and the expression of a man who had arranged his face into concern. Jae-Hyun's chair was empty. Da-Eun sat where they directed her and put her hands flat on the table and looked at the model on the screen and said nothing, while the council member who was leading the review explained the grounds for the meeting and the nature of the concerns. The model on the screen was the wrong version. She knew this. She did not yet know how to prove it in a room with 3 council members and the man who had done it sitting at the end of the table projecting concern. The council lead asked if she could explain the methodology behind the projection changes on page 7. She could explain her methodology. She explained it. Precisely, in order, the way she had explained the discount rate in the elevator and the structural error in the team meeting and the correction process to the model. The room listened. Then the council lead pointed to a specific number on the screen. Da-Eun looked at the number. It was not a number she had put there. She knew this with the absolute certainty of someone who had typed the correct number herself and knew what it felt like under her fingers. The number on the screen was wrong in a specific way, not randomly wrong, Wrong in the way that benefited a particular interpretation of her work. Wrong in the way that required knowing where to put the wrong number to cause the most damage. She was quiet for a moment. "That number," she said, "is not in my version of the model." The council lead looked at his screen. "This is the version on the server under your credentials," he said. "I understand that," she said. "It's not my version." Sung-wook's expression did something careful. "Da-Eun, see," he said with a warmth. "I think what the council is trying to establish." "I know what the council is trying to establish," she said. Not loudly. In the same register she used for discount rates and structural errors and all the other true things she had said to people who didn't want to hear them. "They're trying to establish whether I made an error or whether the file was changed after I submitted it." The room was quiet. The door opened. Han Myung-ja came in. She did not knock. She did not apologize for the interruption. She sat in the empty chair at the side of the room with the ease of someone who considered herself entitled to be present, and pulled her reading glasses from her jacket pocket and put them on, and looked at the model on the screen. "Discount rate methodology," she said to the council lead. "What was the original error in the source document?" The council lead looked at her. "The one the new associate identified in the elevator," Myung-ja said, with the patience of someone who had a point and was going to get to it. "Walk me through how that error compounds across the projection period." The council lead walked her through it. Myung-ja listened, asked 2 questions, looked at the specific number on the screen that Da-Eun had said was not hers. "That number," Myung-ja said, "would only appear if someone had preserved the original error rather than correcting it." She looked at Da-Eun. "Which is the opposite of what I understand you spent the last 2 days doing." Sung-wook's hands were very still on the table. Da-Eun took a breath. She opened her mouth. The door opened again. Ryu Jae-Hyun walked in with a pen drive, and the specific quality of presence that meant the energy of the room was going to reorganize around him, whether or not anyone intended it to. He looked at the screen. He looked at Da-Eun. He looked at Sung-wook. He connected the pen drive to the laptop at the head of the table. "2 versions," he said. "Same file, different timestamps. We're going to look at both." He pulled up the first file. Da-Eun looked at the screen. It was her version, the real one. Every edit visible, time-stamped, documented, exactly as she had built it from 8 a.m. to 7:43 p.m. on Thursday. She looked at Sung-wook. He was looking at the pen drive. Jae-Hyun presented both files in 11 minutes. He did not editorialize. He showed the 6 p.m. backup with its timestamps and credentials, and the documented progression of Da-Eun's corrections through the day. He showed the post-9 p.m. version with its changes and the credentials under which those changes had been saved. He showed the specific delta between the two, the exact numbers that had been altered, the exact locations, the exact effect on the conclusions. He put a final document on the screen. System access log. Timestamp 9:17 p.m. Credentials. Sung-wook's administrative access to the strategy server. Duration, 22 minutes. The room was quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when a thing has been shown that cannot be unshown. One of the council members asked Sung-wook a question. Sung-wook's attorney, who had appeared at some point in the last 3 minutes, said that his client would not be responding at this time. The council members looked at each other. The review was suspended pending formal investigation. Sung-wook was asked to surrender his credentials and escorted from the building by 2 people who appeared with the efficiency of people who had been briefed and were ready. He left without looking at Da-Eun. The room cleared. Myung-ja paused at the door, looked at Da-Eun, nodded once, not sympathy, something more like acknowledgement, the nod of someone who had expected a thing to happen and had seen it happen. She left. Cheol-soo lingered longest, with the expression of a person who wanted to say many things and was exercising restraint. He pointed at Da-Eun. He pointed at Jae-Hyun. He made a gesture that seemed to encompass the entire situation. He left. The room was empty except for Da-Eun and Jae-Hyun, and the 2 versions of the file still open on the laptop. Da-Eun looked at the screen. She looked at the pen drive. She looked at Jae-Hyun, who was closing the files with the calm efficiency of someone completing a task. "You knew before you walked in," she said. He looked at her. Cheol-soo found the backup this morning. he said. You let the review proceed. Yes. You could have stopped it before it started. Yes, he said. He pulled the pen drive from the laptop. I wanted to see how you handled it. She looked at him. This was the second time he had said this, or the second version of this. The first had been in the conference room when he had explained his 6-minute hiring process. And now again here, in the aftermath of a review that had been constructed specifically to undermine her. You test people, she said. I observe people, he said. There's a difference. What did you observe? He put the pen drive in his pocket, looked at the window, at the city beyond it, in the late afternoon light that came at this hour, at this angle through the glass. You knew the file had been changed, he said. You knew it in the room before I arrived. And you didn't panic. You didn't accuse. You stated what you knew and let the evidence be the evidence. She said nothing. Most people, he said, when they're cornered, get loud. He turned to look at her. You get precise. Da-Eun looked at the table. She thought about 3 firings for saying true things to people who didn't want to hear them. She thought about the elevator and the discount rate and the 6-minute interview. She thought about Myung-ja in the doorway of the office on the first day, with her expression of finally. Myung-ja said I was like someone, she said. He was still for a moment. Yes, he said. Who? He looked at the window again. A longer look this time. The look of someone opening a door they usually keep closed, checking the weight of it, deciding whether to go through. Not today, he said. Ask me again. She looked at him. You keep doing that, she said. What? Answering questions on your own schedule. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Yes, he said. I do. He picked up his jacket. The model is correct now, he said. The client presentation is Monday. He left. Da-Eun sat alone in the conference room for a moment. She looked at the empty screen where both versions of her file had been. She picked up her things and went back to her desk and finished the appendix. The article appeared on Monday morning. Not a major outlet. A professional industry newsletter that circulated among people in financial services and consulting. The kind that had enough credibility to be taken seriously and enough distance from the story to repeat allegations without full verification. The headline used the word irregularities, which was the same word the council review email had used, which was not a coincidence. The substance. Ryu Group had suspended a senior director following internal review, and questions remained about the circumstances of the recent hire of a junior associate who had been brought in through an unconventional process. The phrase unconventional process appeared twice. So did the phrase CEO discretion. The article did not name Da-Eun, but described her with enough specificity, female, mid-20s, no previous tenure at firms of this scale, that anyone in the relevant professional circles could identify her within a single conversation. Sung-wook's name was not in the article. His fingerprints were everywhere. Da-Eun read it at her desk at 8:12 a.m. with the particular quality of attention of someone reading about themselves in a document they did not consent to. She read it once. She put her phone face down. She opened her laptop and looked at the client presentation that was due to the internal team in 4 hours and the model that was correct now, documented and time-stamped and ready. And she started reviewing it. At 8:45, Chol-soo appeared at her desk. He looked at her laptop, looked at the presentation she was reviewing. You saw the article, he said. Yes. And you're working, she said. He stood there for a moment with the expression of someone who had several things to say about this response and was deciding how many of them were his to say. He's doing something about it, Chol-soo said. I know, she said. You know? He does things, she said. He just doesn't announce them in advance. Chol-soo looked at her with the expression he had been developing since the elevator, the one that said his model of how the world worked was being incrementally revised. He went back to his desk. At 10 a.m., Jae-Hyun called a press briefing. This was not a thing Ryu Group did. Ryu Group did not hold press briefings. Ryu Group released quarterly reports and responded to regulatory inquiries, and maintained the kind of controlled public presence that required no briefings because it required no explanation. The fact of a briefing was itself a statement, and the 12 people on the 32nd floor understood this and were quiet in the way they were quiet when the building's usual weather patterns had changed. Da-Eun watched through the glass of the conference room from her desk. The briefing lasted 22 minutes. Jae-Hyun presented the timeline of the internal review, the original file, the backup, the system access log, the credentials, the suspension. He presented Da-Eun's hiring documentation, which existed, which was unconventional in process, but defensible in every aspect that mattered, and which he walked through with the specificity of someone who had anticipated every question and had answered it before it was asked. He identified Sung-wook as the source of the newsletter article, with documentation. He did not raise his voice once. He did not use a single word that was doing anything other than its literal job. When the briefing ended, he took 3 questions, answered 2, declined the 3rd with a brevity that communicated he was done. He came back to the 32nd floor. He did not look at Da-Eun's desk as he passed. This was, she had learned, not indifference. At noon, Jeong-Ja found Da-Eun in the small kitchen on the 32nd floor where the coffee was, and where people went when they wanted to be briefly alone in a place that required no explanation. Jeong-Ja poured 2 coffees, gave one to Da-Eun. She leaned against the counter and drank hers for a moment. She was his mother, Jeong-Ja said. Da-Eun looked at her. The person I keep almost mentioning. Jeong-Ja looked at her coffee. She was his mother. She died 3 years ago. She was the kind of person who said what she thought to people who didn't want to hear it. A pause. She was my friend for 26 years. Da-Eun held her coffee. She was his professor first, Jeong-Ja continued. Finance. He was 22. He gave her a report with an error on page 7. She corrected it in front of the class. A small pause that contained something. He kept the corrected report. I saw it in his office once, years later in a frame. The kitchen was quiet. I'm not saying you're her, Jeong-Ja said. I'm saying I understand why he noticed you. She looked at Da-Eun directly, and I think he would like you to understand it too. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, left. Da-Eun stood in the kitchen for a while. She thought about a report in a frame, about a man who had kept a correction for years, about the quality of attention she had recognized in the elevator and the interview and every hallway since, and what that quality was when you understood where it had learned itself. She went to his office. She knocked. This was different from the first time, which had been a mistake. This was intentional, which meant it was different in every way that mattered. Come in, he said. She came in. She sat in the chair across from his desk. The same chair as the 6-minute interview, the heavier paper portfolio still in her bag, never having been opened in this room. She looked at him. You owe me an answer, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he opened his desk drawer. He took out a document, not a report, not a contract, a single page, worn at the fold in the way that things are worn when they have been handled many times over many years. He put it on the desk between them. She looked at it. A financial analysis. Handwritten corrections in the margins in red ink. Page 7, the projection model. The discount rate assumption circled with 2 words written beside it in a hand that was not his. Wrong? Why? The paper was old. The corrections were precise. The 2 words were the kind of question that wasn't really asking the discount rate. She corrected it in class, he said. I was 22. I thought I had built something solid, and she showed me where the load-bearing walls actually were. He looked at the paper. I kept it because it was the first time someone told me I was wrong in a way that assumed I could be right. A pause. Most people at that point were either agreeing with me or trying to correct me without letting me see the correction. She just said the true thing and waited for me to catch up. Da-Eun looked at the page. She died 3 years ago, he said. Quickly. There wasn't time to say most of what I would have said. The office was quiet. In the elevator, he said, you said the discount rate assumption was wrong. Not to me, you didn't know it was to me. Just, out loud because it was true and it was in front of you, and apparently that's what you do. It is what I do, Da-Eun said. It's gotten me fired 3 times. I know, he said. I read your employment history. When? After the elevator. He looked at her. Before I called you into the office. She absorbed this. You hired me in 6 minutes, she said. I had already made the decision, he said. The 6 minutes was confirmation. She looked at the corrected page on the desk between them. She thought about a man who kept a correction in a frame for years, about the quality of attention that came from learning, early, that being wrong well was more valuable than being right carelessly, about what it meant to be noticed by someone who noticed things precisely. I'm not her, Da-Eun said. I know, he said. She was 61 when she died, and she had been married for 30 years, and she had opinions about architecture that I disagreed with every single time. A pause. You're not her. You say true things the same way she did. The effect is similar. What effect? He looked at her directly, in the way he had looked at page 7 in the elevator and at the meeting room through the glass and at the model on the screen during the review. Complete attention. No performance. That makes me want to be in the same room, he said. Specifically. Continuously. He looked at the desk. I recognize that this is a thing I should have said differently given the professional context. You're saying it now, she said. Yes. She looked at the corrected page. She looked at him. You are very difficult, she said. I know, he said. Ma Young-ja tells me this regularly. I'm also difficult, she said. I know, he said. I read your employment history. Something that had been building since the elevator. Since the 11 seconds before she said the true thing she couldn't keep inside. Arrived and stayed. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay, he said. 1 year later, Da-Eun presented to the full council. Not the 28th floor conference room, the main boardroom, 32nd floor. The one with a view that said, decisions made here have consequences. She had a slide deck and a financial model and a client engagement that had started with a corrected error on page 7 and had grown into the kind of thing that got presented to full councils. She presented for 38 minutes. The council asked 9 questions. She answered all 9. In the back row, Nam Cheol-soo had his phone angled at a specific angle that allowed him to appear to be reviewing documents while sending a live account of the presentation to his mother, who was responding in real time with increasing enthusiasm despite having no background in financial analysis. In the front row, Han Myung-ja sat with her reading glasses and her coffee, and the expression of someone watching a thing they had been expecting to see arrive. Jae-Hyun sat at the head of the table. He asked the 9th question. Da-Eun answered it with the same quality of attention as the elevator, the interview, the review, every conversation in between. Precise, without performance. Saying the true thing because it was true, and it was there, and that was what she did. After the presentation, in the elevator. Going down. The same elevator. She had thought about this, about the symmetry of it, and had decided not to mention it, and had gotten into the elevator anyway. He was beside her. He had a report in his hand. She looked at the report. She looked at the floor numbers. She lasted 9 seconds. Page 7, she said. He turned to page 7. He looked at it. He was quiet for a moment with the specific quality of quiet that she had learned in a year of sharing offices and conference rooms and elevator rides, meant that he was checking something he already knew the answer to. It's correct, he said. I know, she said. I wrote it. He looked at her. She looked at the floor numbers. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Neither of them moved for a moment. The specific pause of 2 people who have been in the same room many times and have learned to be unhurried about leaving it. There's a correction on page 12, he said. She looked at the report. She looked at page 12. She found the error. She told him what it was. He listened. He turned the report toward her and handed her the pen from his jacket pocket. She corrected it. In the margins, in ink, with the 2 words that weren't really asking about the number. She handed the report back. He looked at the correction. He put the report under his arm. They walked out into Seoul together, the city enormous and indifferent and entirely itself, moving through a morning that had no idea what was happening inside an elevator between two difficult people who had found, in each other, someone worth being precise for.